Hello everyone. This is Mufaddal Sadriwala and this is SEO in 2023.
Mufaddal, what is your number one SEO tip for 2023?
I'm really putting my bet on web stories. I mean, basically, web stories is going to be a huge thing, in my opinion, in the near future for Google and for the users as well. So, yeah, I think it is going to improve a lot in 2023 and obviously going further down the line. So, I would recommend all the brands, all the SEO consultants to just start something, start some basics with the web stories, start figuring out what you want to do around that. And yeah, that's the number one tip I have for everyone for 2023.
Great. Okay, so you say web stories, formerly AMP stories. So if an SEO hasn't heard of web stories before, what are the advantages of web stories, and what target markets, what type of business is best suited for it?
Okay, so if you've not heard about web stories, basically, so your stories are obviously we all know about the Instagram stories and all of these, social media stories. So your web stories is the same as your stories that goes on Instagram and all these social media platforms. Just the difference is that this is being added onto your website, and you have a shareable URL which you can send it out to anyone who is wanting to view your story on your website and not on any other platform. So basically, you have more control over your stories and you can track them in your web analytics tool like Google Analytics or Adobe or wherever you want to track them. And the best part about this is that your stories can be featured on Google Discover. So if you're putting out a story and once Google starts picking up as indexing that story, so it can feature on Google Discover, which is the queryless feed that we have on Google search app. So the way it works is that obviously all the data that Google has about our browsing history, about our source history, about the websites that we have visited, all of these. So Google starts displaying your story in Google Discover to the targeted users, to the users that it feels is relevant. So as an example, if I am a sports enthusiast and I am into soccer and I have done a lot of searches in the past about the players, about the scores and everything about the matches that are going to be coming in the future. So Google identifies that I am a soccer fan. So if a sports or a news website puts up story around, let's say Ronaldo or Messi, then Google will automatically start, might start showing up that story to me in my Google Discover feed. So that's how, as a user, Google is identifying that I am falling into one category, and that's how that story can be featured in my Discover tab whenever I'm using my Google search app. That's one part. And the great thing about story that has just recently started, I think in 2022, is that Google has also started featuring web stories in the search results. So, all the shift that we are looking at about, the more visual content consumption that is happening across the platforms, that same thing is also reflecting in Google search. So Google is realizing that and also putting out web stories in the Google search results as well. So if someone is searching for a very visual heavy search, Google, along with all the video carousels and everything, along with all the images, for some queries is showing up the web stories on Google search as well, basically. So that's where I said, it is going to go upward from there. So yeah, I mean, this is what everything about stories is, how do we create, and then, I mean, what are the importance of it, and then, wherever it is visible. So that's basically about it.
There's a lot to unpack there. You talked about obviously how web stories work to begin with there. I'd like to go back and really understand how they work in relation to your own website, because you also said that you can, I don't know if you use the word publish on your own website. You said you can have them on
Yeah,
your own website. So I'd like to understand
correct,
technically how that works. But also towards the end there, you talked about Discover as well. And
correct.
Discover is probably is something relatively new as well. And as I understand it, it's like an AI assisted feed reader that automatically updates content based upon your preferences as the tool understands you. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's what it is basically. So the way Discover Feed works is I mean, it is like you said, it's an AI and it's a machine learning generated feed that features content from across the web. It's not just web stories, but it also features articles across the web, depending on my preferences, depending on my personalization. Like I said, it takes into account, a lot of our browsing history, search history, and things that we have been searching for, the kind of content that we consume, etc. So that's basically what Google takes into account when they are displaying content in our Discover feed. And I mean, to put it in a very simple way, just imagine it's like your social media feed, it's like your Instagram feed on the type of content that we engage with on social media, the type of content, the accounts that we engage with on, let's say, on Instagram. Instagram pushes those, the algorithm pushes those kind of more such content to us in our feed. So that's the, I would say, more or less the same way Google is also, Google also shows the websites or the articles or the stories in our Discover feed, depending on what we have been looking for, what are our interests, and then our locations and things like that. So a lot of factors are again taken into account, but I can say, it's much more crisp and much more relevant whatever Google shows to the users, because obviously Google has the most data about what we have been searching for, what types of websites that we visit. So that's the way Google Discover is. And like I said, it's not just web stories that get featured in Discover, but also your articles can also get featured. But given stories are more visually appealing, I'm putting my bet on that. So yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, it sounds like Google Discover is something else to unpack some other time. Maybe we need to have some kind of majestic
Yeah,
webinar on
exactly,
exactly how
exactly.
you can use Google Discover. So, kind of going back
Right.
to web stories and
Yeah.
your mention of the fact that you can publish them from your website. What does that actually mean, and what does that look like technically?
Okay, so what the way we can do it? So there are two ways on how we can create web stories on our website. The first way is Google has created a plugin which is specifically created for WordPress websites. So what you can do is, obviously, if your website is not on WordPress, you can, let's say, buy a subdomain on, let's say, webstories dot the domain.com,
Okay.
and install WordPress on that subdomain, and then you can start creating web stories using that plugin, which is a very easy and very user friendly plugin. So it's just drag and drop on the, like the way we create presentations. It's just that we have a couple of slides that we can create. We can add images, we can add text, we can visualize it, we can, create a design and make it beautiful, and we have all the control right just at click basically. So the way, I mean, obviously people who have used WordPress, they know how easy it is to create content using the platform. So that's one way of doing that. And the other way is, then we have to use, Google then lays down, if you have to do static coding basically, then we have to use AMP as a technology to create web stories. And for that, you will need the help of a developer on creating the web stories. So the way that works is that we have to then create, we have to then decide upon the slides that goes into the story, and then, sit with the developer and get that as a hard coded page, and then that can go as a web story to the, to the URL basically, or to the website that we are publishing it. So
Understood.
yeah,
So SEOs, we're really keen on the fact that it's a WordPress plugin. It's something that will integrate directly with WordPress, and
exactly,
in essence, it's published on your own website and then shared
exactly,
as a web story on
exactly,
Google.
exactly.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
And what's best practice in terms of format? Because obviously with WordPress, you can publish long posts of 10,000 words if you want, but you talked about social media style posts. So is there a best format for a web story?
Yeah, so your web stories, I think, should be more in the listicle format, basically, and it should be more on the visual side of things. So one of the way I started doing web stories was whatever textual content I had on my website, I figured out all the best performing textual content, blog content, articles that I had on my website, and I turned them into web stories basically, and not obviously just copying and pasting things from there, but figuring out how many, what are the top 10, top 20 articles, and then inside that, how many slides do I have to create, and then obviously adding more media to that, more images and, audios, videos, and things like that. So I mean, consider web stories as obviously a thing that is very visually appealing. You have to make it visually appealing, and then it's not like your usual text content or your articles or the long form content that we have, but I mean, look at it in a way where you are giving out more information in the visual way rather than just, adding a block of text and things like that.
And what about video? Is video supported?
Yeah, we can add videos. So it supports videos, it supports GIF, it supports animation. We can also add audio. So if you have a audio recorded, we can also add that basically. And the great part is we can also add a call to action at the end of the web stories, or even in between any of the slides that we are looking at. So if we are, let's say, if you're wanting users to subscribe to your newsletters, if you're wanting users to read more about the story that you have created in the textual format that already exists, if you're wanting people to buy a product, as an example, if you have talked about a dress, let's say you have created a web story on 10 wedding dresses that, let's say, the brides can consider, and you can actually, add a link to each of the slides or each of the dresses that you're talking about, and people can explore the product, and also make a purchase accordingly. So everything, it's like possible with web stories. You can add a link, you can add a call to action, you can get more subscribers, you can also now promote your advertising. So basically, if you have a 10 slides of web stories, you can also add one slide of ad in between. You can integrate your ad platform, and your ads can also start showing up in your web stories. So Google is looking at it as a long term thing, and putting their best technology forward, and making it, improving it on a daily basis basically.
And what do analytics look like? Can you see who's reading? Can you see which countries they're from? How long they're staying for? What other stats can you see?
Yeah, so you can. It's like I said. It's whenever we create a web story, it generates a unique URL. Like we have a URL for articles and long form content and everything. So we can obviously, measure the traffic. We can measure the impact of it by putting the URL as a filter in analytics in Search Console, and we get to know what type of users and what countries did they visit from, and how many actual visits came to that stories and things like that. So it's like, analyzing traffic or analyzing performance of a usual URL that we take into account. So that's the way it's like your usual stuff. Like you have a URL, and then using that URL, you can put that as a filter in any of the tools that you are using, and analyze the performance of the traffic. And it gives you all the information: the male, the genders, and the demographics, locations, language, etc.
So you're saying there's no separate analytics specifically for web stories. You have to use something like Google Analytics.
No. We can use anything. You Google Analytics, given obviously the most widely used analytics tool
Mhm. Yeah,
is
sure.
what I'm giving as an example. But you can use any tools. Like I said, it's an URL that gets created, and obviously when a URL gets created, all the analytics code that you have added on your website, that gets added automatically to that. So I get how, from where your question, where you are coming from on this, because I remember in AMP HTML we had to create a separate GA code that had to be added on that. So in this case, you don't have to do anything for web stories. It's like your normal analytics code that gets added to that, and we can analyze the traffic performance like we do it for any of the URLs.
So you shared what SEO should be doing in 2023. So now let's talk about what SEO shouldn't be doing. So what's something that's seductive in terms of time, but ultimately counterproductive? What's something that SEO shouldn't be doing in 2023?
So I can talk about two things in this basically, and it's obviously about what we shouldn't be doing, but also then what should we start doing after that. So I think what we should stop doing as an SEO consultant or as an SEO professional is looking at SEO from a very I would say narrow perspective. Like, okay, this is on page, this is off page, this is link building, this is technical, and that's it. This is what my job is. SEO should stop looking at SEO as a, I would say, in silos, but or we should look at SEO from a broader perspective on how it sits in the marketing budget, where does it fit in the product market fit, what SEO as an SEO, what value can we add in terms of, obviously, apart from other marketing channels, where do we stand, and the bigger picture for the brand, for the marketing team, also for the product, where does SEO fit, and how we can contribute more apart from obviously the SEO changes that we are recommending. So like web stories is one of the examples in that, right? So obviously, if you are using web stories in that, the strategy can go long way. Like when let's say the social media team is creating a campaign for that will go for IG to Facebook and all of these platforms, can we also request them to create strategy, or we can recommend a strategy and use that in our web stories as well. So whenever like a series of let's say stories are going on Instagram, can we also utilize that to be put up on our web stories as well, basically, so that obviously the performance that is being measured in on these social media platforms can also test our ground on discover and on features on Google search results as well. So point is that stop looking at SEO just as a medium or just as an SEO thing, but start looking at it more from a holistic approach on what we can do better, and how we can work with each other, how we can work cross functionally with other departments and make our product, make our website, make our brand better in terms of everything. So that's one of the advice that I would say. And the other is this is something that I see a lot of, I mean, I've seen this a lot of agencies still do that, and they talk about these all these obsolete techniques like social bookmarking and all of these directory submissions and all of these techniques that have become really obsolete, I think, for the last 10 years now, but still I see these things in the deck that are pitched to the client. So I would recommend this is hard time to, stop talking about these techniques. Like the other day, I was scrolling Twitter and then I saw someone asking John on Twitter, does directory submission help in social bookmark in website ranking? And then John gave a very smart reply to them. So, it's very hard time to stop talking about these techniques and, like, again, coming to that point, start looking at SEO from a more holistic approach and looking at the bigger picture rather than just looking at on page, off page, and technical side of things.
Wonderful thoughts. Mufaddal Sadriwala is SEO manager at Assembly Global, and you can find him over at mufaddal.digital. Mufaddal, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2023.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It was a real pleasure having this conversation with you.
Get your copy of SEO in 2023, the book, over at SEOin2023.com.